Game is starting. Okay. Retweets are always appreciated if you have a
Oh, I
moment.
never realized. I never realized that it tweeted out like once per like Twitch, YouTube, whatever, Periscope.
Yeah.
So I've always retweeted like one of them.
I
Usually
always
the
do. I
YouTube
always
one.
try to do the Periscope one.
Why that one over the YouTube one?
Just because the video's in the tweet, so I don't know.
Is it? Oh, I don't see it that way.
I'm gonna try to type something in a tweet here. It's gonna take me about a half hour, so
I tweeted I tweeted out from PHP Ugly already.
yeah, I'm just retweeting
Oh,
because I have more followers. I'm just saying. All right, all right. Let's get this. Let's get this show on the road.
bastard.
Hey, let's see if this works this time. Tell me if you hear this.
Rare early recorder versus recording. That's okay. Whatever.
You hear?
Nope. Don't hear it.
You don't hear it at all?
Nope.
Uh, that's all right. I'll do it in post. I don't know why it's supposed. To, oh, it's supposed to. Be, oh, I know why. Actually, I do know why. Here, let's see if we can get this working. Hold on one second. I doubt if anybody's joined us yet. Oop. Here we go. So we're gonna just do this. Turn that on and turn this on. All right. Tell me if you hear it now. Not yet.
Yep.
You are listening to the PHP Ugly Podcast. And despite what the title may lead you to believe, this is a podcast about the joys and challenges of being a professional PHP developer. Your hosts are three passionate developers who make a living coding and who live stream every week to discuss coding, projects, work, tech, and running a business. And now, here are your hosts, Eric Van Johnson, John Congdon, and Tom Rideout.
Hey, you're listening to episode 193 of PHP Ugly. I'm Eric, and with me is.
I'm John. We're not doing it that way.
Oh, that was perfect. Go, Thomas. Thomas.
I'm keeping the ugly.
I'm Tom.
That's supposed to be the ending, not the intro, huh?
No,
Screw that one
I
up.
like it. I like it. It gets us through much quicker. She's already said our full name. We don't need to say it again. It's not like it's that important. I just like to get.
I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys recording early so that she didn't lie about having three passionate developers on the air right now.
No problem, man. What's the deal? Can you share your plans?
I can't share the plans because I don't know the plans. Other than my wife invited me on a date tonight.
Oh,
For the first time, in the past few months. So her mom's coming over to watch the kids, and we're gonna probably just go for a hike or something. But the chances of me being back in time for a show tonight was gonna be unlikely.
yeah, I get it. Cool, man. I personally get very upset when the wife goes out on dates without me. It's very
It is annoying.
right, right. And the guy she goes out with, come on. Okay, so wow, looking at the Trello board, lots of Trello cards. This is awesome. This is exciting. How's everybody's week?
It's been weird.
Frustrating.
Welcome to America.
Now get out.
Yeah, I get it. It's been I mean, just across the board, it's just been a weird world to live in. So let's try to stay focused on work. how's
Yeah.
how's everybody's job
We-
going?
We brought up politics once last week, and look what happened.
It got better. We changed the world for the better.
Mm, okay, if that's what you think.
We're working on it. I've been testing.
Cool.
You have been. I saw that in Slack.
Yeah, I don't like it.
What brought that on? You don't like it now. I got to admit, when you first get into it, yes, it sucks and it's not fun.
No,
It's very much like Vim, Thomas. At first, you don't see the point. It seems frustrating, but then you start to appreciate what you're doing.
Until you get a new keyboard. We'll talk about that
We'll
later.
get to that point.
well, since my system is a monolith and we're adding testing to it, it's just functional testing. It's not unit testing. It's not
It's testing.
really.
Man. That's all. That's what matters.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, make this thing say okay.
I've been there. I work in a monolith as well. And adding tests after a decade of building a piece of software is hard.
I have to say, PHP unit is not great if there's like a 500 error or something like that. Like if I'm just trying to check that a page is calling correctly, PHP unit doesn't give me a lot to go off of.
In what way? What are you expecting and what's not happening?
So the first big thing was that I'm running in a test environment. So we've had our 3 environments before, local, staging, production, but adding testing to it meant that a lot of stuff was just not configured to work correctly.
Just because you're not used to having that additional environment?
Right. And so I ended up with a ton of 500 errors that I couldn't see what the error was because PHP unit doesn't give it to you. It just says there was an error.
Now, why do you need a testing environment versus a local environment?
Because that gets into the other part is authentication. Laravel has this really nice built-in authentication system so you can pretend to be a specific user for PHP unit. But we're not using Laravel's built-in authentication. So that was a huge pain in the ass. And what I didn't realize is that PHP unit somehow PHP unit is running as an instance of your Laravel project when you run it. So like in the test, you can log in, you can force a login as a test user, and then when you make the get call to your endpoint, it's still the same instance.
So you're trying to test your controllers, which is a little bit different, obviously, than unit testing. PHP unit, while it can do functional testing, isn't really meant to do functional testing.
Right, but Laravel's idea of PHP unit is functional testing. They when you look at their documentation page, it's just functional testing. There's nothing on unit testing. There's nothing on DDD or anything like that, or TDD.
Isn't that what Dust is, though? Is that what you're using?
No, we're just using PHP unit.
Okay.
It sounds like I don't know. I haven't done any real testing in Laravel, although we do have a application, a greenfield application that we started a couple months ago, where we have a couple developers that didn't do unit testing prior, or very little, that have really taken hold of it in this application because it was basically a requirement. And the 2 developers on that have raved about their excitement around having all these tests and how it's kind of changed from other client work that they've done, or gave them a better perception of testing. Having the tests up front has been so helpful.
Yeah, it's great and all. It's just that because this is a monolith and we're not set up for unit testing, we're controller heavy. It's more difficult.
Yeah, so the application I work in is the same way, where so much work is done in the controller, refactoring becomes hard at that point. It's only recently in the past few months that we've been able to write controller tests because of the sheer scale of the code base itself. Unit testing legacy controllers is basically impossible. You having a framework such as Laravel kind of probably helps you out there.
Yeah, a little bit. It's been all week, so it's not like it's been easy.
So is it the fact that you boot up the application, you bootstrap Laravel, are you saying when you call multiple endpoints you're having an issue because of the authentication piece?
God, I haven't even checked for that. I'm just authenticating with every test now. But I probably don't need to. I probably just need to authenticate on the first test.
Well, no, tests should live independently. So yes, you should be authenticating on every test, in my opinion, because PHP unit in general does not guarantee order of tests. Mm-hmm. So while you could authenticate in one and assume that they're going to go in order, you shouldn't guarantee that, or you shouldn't assume that, especially if you ever want to get into parallel testing, because you can't.
That was the other thing too, is that we have a helper file that's loaded by the autoload script that overrides the routes method that Laravel institutes, and something about how PHP unit is set up for Laravel, it's bootstrapping Laravel first and then loading the autoload from your Laravel bootstrap directory. So it was doing it in the wrong order, and I was getting a cannot override method error. I mean, a lot of it's doing something weird. It's not like it's just making an HTTP request to pull the page. It's actually loading Laravel up in some way.
All right, it's kind of on a separate topic. What is the impetus for you changing and adding these tests? We talked about it before, and you just basically had no interest, or just not something you did.
I've had interest. I've wanted to do this for a while. I just haven't had the opportunity to, and my boss gave me a ticket that said, "Hey, update us to the latest, setup for testing." And
yes, Eric, that's you. Dogs barking.
No, that's me.
It's not me.
Is it you?
It's Thomas.
So I really don't know what the impetus was, but now we're doing it, so I'm happy.
Awesome. Well, the more testing, the better. I mean, once you work through these hurdles, testing becomes easier, right?
Yeah.
It's as with everything else. There's the learning curve. You get better at it. You can add tests, and then you wonder how you ever lived without those tests.
Yeah, and I think everything moving forward is going to be written for testing, which is going to be nice.
Yeah, moving your logic out of the controllers is going to be a huge step forward in that.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the overall larger project is we're moving towards React and API-driven sites. I'm going to find out who my dog is trying to murder.
Okay. Eric, I do have a question for you while he's doing that.
Lay it on me.
I've never seen in Trello these orange tickets. What is that all about?
Look at you. You have a keen eye, my friend. Not only are they orange, but I also have one with me. In Trello now, you can actually set the background of the ticket. So you can set it to an image, or you can set it to a color. So that's what I did.
So you're just trying to make them stand out just for fun?
Yeah, and it occurred to me that if we did this as a standard, I would know who covered which topic. Not that that's an issue in the show notes, but I don't know. I just felt like it would be helpful information to have if we went back and looked and go, oh, these are orange. It's something Eric talked about or something like that.
Or something you added versus having to go through the history of that ticket.
Right. Yeah.
Well, actually, since we were just talking about PHP Unit, I've had this ticket on my board now for a couple of weeks, and it's kind of timely. Somebody shaved half their testing time by running PHP Unit directly rather than through Composer Test. This has never affected me. I've never ran my tests through Composer, but it's something to think about. If that's how you're doing it, maybe that's not the best approach.
That is,
You just
I didn't even know you could run it through Composer. That's how stupid I am.
I had no clue either.
I knew there was a PHP artisan command to run test, and I don't even use that. I still use the vendor bin PHP unit, and I think that's just habit for me. But that's interesting.
See, I do it all directly through PHP Storm at this point, just because it's so easy to have it run. I love the fact that I can have it auto run every time a file is saved.
Yeah, but
because I usually run.
Isn't PHP Storm using your vendor bin directory, or is it using its own
Yeah.
version? Yeah, yeah. Okay, same thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. It's running it directly. I didn't know people were using Composer Test, but if you are and you're noticing a slowdown, according to Michael Dorinda, you can shave a lot of time off just by running it directly.
How does Composer Test even know what PHP unit to use? Well, I guess it just figures.
It's just a command that calls the vendor bin directory.
Yeah, I was saying. I guess it figures. It knows it's installed.
Composer is smart, and I mean, then it does a lot. I mean, I have commands in there that I can run doing Composer run some command. I just don't use it all that often.
Well, also speaking about testing, Grumpy Programmer, we know him.
King of testing.
King of testing in the PHP world. Him and
who has a new book out, by the way.
He does.
On PHP Architect.
What's it called? Do you remember what it's called? Grumpy testing.
No. That was a very bad intro to that, huh?
It would have been helpful if you had a title, yeah. As he frantically types it on his new keyboard, which we'll get to. Well, him and Ed Finkler, they were one of the first podcasts. I remember listening to them and listening to Roundtable as far as PHP podcasts go. And then Phil Sturgeon's were the three PHP podcasts I listened to back in the day. They finally hit episode 100 of Dev Hill, and needless to say, they weren't as consistent with us. I think at one point they took about a year or two hiatus on doing any podcasting, but apparently they're done. It was like their last official Dev Hill podcast, and you know, they didn't say that they would never going to record again or anything like that, but that was going to be kind of like the
they basically alluded to it.
Yeah. But it was good. It was good to hear from them again, and of course it was a great show too.
Well, one thing I discovered while I was playing with PHP Unit is the use of doc blocks currently in PHP Unit.
Uh-huh.
And it got me thinking about what we were talking about with attributes the last 2 weeks. And that's an excellent place for attributes to be used.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
You can have tests that depend on tests that depend on tests and stuff like that. You can have deprecations and all that kind of fancy stuff you need. And I wouldn't be surprised if the next version of PHP Unit uses attributes.
It makes sense. It's just a natural evolution of PHP Unit. It's funny. I just interviewed Derek for this month's issue of PHP Architect. So that would have been a good question to have for him.
For Community Quarter?
Yeah. I asked him a bunch of questions. I wish I had thought of that one, Thomas. That would have been a good question to ask. I think I do ask something like what's the future hold for a PHP Unit or something like that, but I don't remember. I definitely didn't ask that question.
I do need to share this, and I'll put it into Trello. On PhoneBurner, I've often been very confused on testing because I use doc blocks a lot with app before versus setup. Because if you use traits, it's a lot easier to create methods and have an app before doc block on there. But what comes first? The doc blocks, the app before annotations, the setup before class. So somebody took the time to figure out what the order of running these methods is. And running the app before in your traits is before the parent. There's just a whole ordering here, and that's always been confusing to me. So I'll share that in the show notes.
Hey, John.
What?
You've rearranged your office.
I have.
It looks much cleaner.
That's because on the other side of this door over here, it is an absolute mess. I've got this little 8-foot by 6-foot basically cut out of an office here. And with us closing down our office, I wanted to bring my desk from there into here. I was going to put 2 desks in here, but once I started putting things back together, I realized it's really nice having it opened up and not taking up every square inch of this place. So I'm still in the middle of setting it up. I got my desk back here, which is a very desk, which I like a lot. Got it back here. Everything was fine. It's a standing desk, so it was going up and down just fine. And then all of a sudden decided to stop. And
did it stop in the standing position or the sitting position?
In the middle.
Awesome.
So it's no longer a desk.
It was literally in the middle. I spent probably a good half hour trying different things, finally look up instructions, figured out how to reset it through a little key combination, got it reset. It started working again. I was happy. And then it stopped again, this time at the very lowest position, so I can at least use the desk. It's lower than I want it to be, but it was usable. This was over the weekend. I finally called them on Saturday, and I figured it was a 1-year warranty. We bought it a 1.5 years ago when we opened the office. Nope, 5-year warranty. They didn't ask any questions. We're going to ship you a brand new desk. So that should be here next week.
Cool.
What are you going to do with the old one?
Send it back. They do want it back.
Oh.
Yeah.
So
that was Eric's question too.
Far off of the title, John. It's called The Grumpy Programmer's Guide to Testing PHP Applications. And it's available today on PHP Architect website. So there's that.
Look at you cross-promoting.
Hey, man. It's my world now, I got a question for you, John. The project you were talking about that uses the developers are using tests. I do know one of those developers posted in our Slack channel, stop using SQLite and Laravel unit tests. Do you know what prompted that?
That wasn't from my application.
Oh, it wasn't. Oh, okay. All right.
No, that was not from the application I worked on.
Okay. I keep meaning to ask him about that, and I haven't.
That was from the Greenfield application I was talking about earlier. They were using SQLite. It's a common practice just to speed up your tests, but there are differences between SQLite and MySQL, and if you're not aware of them, your test could break. I don't know.
Or not break, I think is the issue.
Is it? I don't know. I haven't delved deep enough into what was going on to figure it out.
It's a typecasting issue.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure SQLite actually has the ability to do like JSON columns like MySQL. So maybe but that would break the test. So I don't know if that was the issue.
The issue that I've seen is that if you have a type integer and you try to put a float into it, MySQL will complain, but SQLite won't.
I see. Interesting.
There's also issues with string length not being correctly applied to things and foreign key relationships not being correctly applied.
So it's not.
Go ahead. I don't think it's necessarily you need to stop using unit tests like the title suggests. It's
right.
You need to be aware of what's happening. I still think SQLite is a good option to use for your tests if you're being careful.
I agree. Yeah, and just knowing what the differences were. Okay, cool. I was just knew anything about it. Okay, can we talk about the elephant in the room here? Because Fortunately, we don't have a lot of people talking to us in Discord because I honestly couldn't reply to them right now. I posted on Twitter earlier this week, and I'll try to position my camera. There we go.
Oh my God, that
I
is
got my.
an absolutely hideous keyboard.
Oh no. All right, let me tell you. First off, this feels so good as far as typing goes. I have never felt more comfortable on a keyboard than I do this keyboard. So I got a new. How do you pronounce this, John? Kinesis?
It's the Kinesis Advantage 2.
Kinesis Advantage 2. And it's this completely ergonomically correct keyboard for people listening to the podcast. I'm showing it on the stream for anybody interested. It's extreme. It's very extreme. Now, I'm a big guy. I have fairly large hands. My favorite keyboard in the past was this big Microsoft ergonomic keyboard, and I enjoyed it. I then moved over to this. I still have it actually plugged in. This DOS keyboard, and it's just a regular keyboard. I mean, it's just a regular layout. But I was having issues with my wrists and my, just basically my wrists. So I wanted to give this a try. And my God, it has really slowed me down these last couple of days, but I'm gradually getting better. The biggest thing you can see is that, first thing, the keys, the left and right side of the keys are physically separated pretty far. And then there's this concave of keys, so your hand fits in here very comfortably. The one thing I really like about it is things like the space bar and interbar are down here by your thumb. So this is nice. What I don't like about it are like a lot of the key combinations, I don't even think about how I do them. Like to open up LastPass, I keep saying LastPass, to open up 1Password or to snap my windows around. I couldn't even tell you what the key combination was, and they're completely wrong on this keyboard. Like I can't use them at all.
They're not wrong. They're just in a different position.
Right, they're in a different position.
So, for the podcast only listeners, this thing looks like it's the size of a skateboard.
It's very small.
And
small.
And
yeah.
It's got these divots on the far right and left side where half of the keyboard belongs, and then it's
an ergonomic keyboard. It's a split
giant
design
metal plate.
It's a split design ergonomic keyboard.
It's actually very light. Did
you get the foot pedals?
No, I didn't get the foot pedals.
I saw them.
I'm not sure what they're used for, but I didn't get them. So one of the first things I did, because I'm a Vim person and I use the control key a lot between Vim and Tmux, is on here the control is this one key on the right hand side of the keyboard. So on the left hand side where the cap locks is, I actually remap my cap locks to control. I think John actually has the same keyboard, and I think you remapped yours to Apple.
Yeah. No, I haven't remapped it at all. You need to upgrade the firmware on it, and there's a new setting where you can do it based on how long you press the key. So it could be a caps lock if you just tap it.
Oh, really?
And if you hold down caps lock, it becomes a control key.
Oh, I might have to do that. I was
or
upgrading.
This
is a total programmable keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
It comes where you can do it as a QWERTY or a Dvorak keyboard. You can remap the keys as much as you want. You can also record macros. So if you are often typing the same thing, you can set it up through the keyboard to do it for you, which is really cool.
And the really nice thing about it is all that programming of the keyboard is in the keyboard. So if you change computers, everything you've programmed in the keyboard goes with the keyboard. So all those mappings and stuff. One of the things I didn't realize that really messed with me, and if you're a developer, or if you type regularly, you know that on a typical keyboard, the keys are each row is typically offset from the row on top of it. So like to go S to X, it would be you have to go down and to the right a little bit. But on these keyboards, all the keys are in a line. So X is directly under S. That really kind of takes. You really have to start to trust yourself with your typing and where keys are. But
Oh, this keyboard has proven how bad of a typer I really am, because
that's me.
right now, I think my right hand was always off by a key. Like my home was HJKL
Mm-hmm.
because that's the movement keys in Vim.
Mm-hmm.
So my fingers were always off as is, and then that's probably the biggest thing, along with my left thumb. I think does a majority of my space bar. So it just completely threw me off. The first day I had it, I got to a point where, okay, I've got to get some work done. And some videos I watched afterwards were like, don't make the switch when you have work to do.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, because you're going to be so frustrated that you're going to throw the thing out the window.
I totally feel that.
Wait till you have some time to dedicate to learning it. I think the same is true if you were to switch to the Dvorak layout. Dvorak, I don't know how you actually pronounce it.
That's
Dvorak.
how I pronounce it, Dvorak.
Yeah.
I've actually wanted to switch to Dvorak for years. The reason I don't is because all the research I've read on it's such a better layout and so much less stressful, and you can type so much quicker. I had a friend I worked with years ago who swore by it. And the only reason I haven't switched to it, because I'm not a great typist either, and especially back then and even now, I was like a hunt and peck sort of typer. So I figured I could teach myself Dvorak just as well as I was on the QWERTY. The reason I don't switch it is because so many of the keyboards are QWERTY. I don't want to be tripping over my fingers like when I go to my parents' house or something like that, because it's not super simple to switch between the two all the time.
Yeah. There's been, from what I've read yesterday because of this keyboard, there's been no real scientific research showing that Dvorak is any faster than QWERTY.
Oh, really? I heard differently, but
it's mostly anecdotal.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing showing that it's actually any faster.
I tell you what.
Yeah, it's like those studies about Vim.
Don't even start. I find myself, I'm so happy I use Vim. You can say what you want, Thomas, because I find myself wanting to leave the keyboard less and less. I wasn't a big fan of reaching over for my mouse before. That's why I had the Vim plugin installed on my browser. But now, I'm so comfortable here, and so much is accessible to me. I really, really don't like reaching over for my mouse now. It's so frustrating to me. But yeah, this is work.
We're going further and further backwards in this computing age, where you've got this gigantic steel slab of a keyboard. No more mouse.
This keyboard is. Look, Thomas. This keyboard is not no. It's a little smaller than my previous keyboard.
We're gonna have you running tape backups soon for everything instead of cloud backups.
Listen, tape backups are awesome. I'm the hippie of the digital age, but no, I don't know. I don't understand why you fight it so much, but
Well, actually, because I'm looking at building an ErgoDox keyboard.
I don't know what that is.
Is that the 3D printed one that is actual separated keys?
So yeah, sometimes it's 3D printed, but it's split in two. It's actually completely separate, two separate pods.
It's actually three, isn't it? There's the left, the right, and then the thumb. The thumb is its own center pod.
Okay, so I haven't seen that one, but there are a lot of designs out there, of course.
ErgoDox keyboard?
ErgoDox.
Oh, DOX. Okay.
If it's the one I'm thinking of, again, in doing a lot of research for this Kinesis one, I saw that, and that's one of the complaints, that they really want to see Kinesis offer that option of a truly split keyboard.
Oh.
So the thing with the ErgoDox is that you can buy all the pieces individually and make your own.
It looks like the key layout is exactly the same, though. And I'm not saying that as a negative. I'm saying it's the exact same key layout as this.
Yeah, it's very similar.
No, it's not very similar. It's exactly the same. I'm looking at it.
Well, it uses a Teensy 32 chip, and I think it has basically the same feature set.
Yeah. So the one thing I did notice, although the keys aren't marked, it's funny, John. I don't know if you ran into this yet, but when we're coding and you're doing where you have to, what's the rocket called? The equal, what's that called? When
The fat arrow?
Yeah, is that what you call it?
Equal greater than?
Yeah. It took me like 10 minutes to find the equal plus symbol on this keyboard.
Yeah. Same. It wasn't
completely where it's not supposed to be.
I noticed that as well.
Oh, man. I was frustrated because I thought I was going to have to switch to the keypad every time I wanted to hit the equal sign, and I'm like, this is not going to work for coding. And then I realized, it's on the left-hand side at the top there, just under the escape key. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So,
but you have a contact in common, a person in common that uses a keyboard that swears by it as well. You and Thomas do.
Oh, what's that?
Oh,
who's that?
That's right. Your boss uses it, Jose.
But he uses an ergonomic keyboard and didn't offer me one.
He uses this keyboard, and he even said, "Give it a couple days, you'll get fast." And I've already felt my speed increasing. Like the first day was horrible. But I will say I used it for 24 hours straight. Like I had made the decision that I was going to use it for 24 hours for sure, and I was still struggling by the 24th hour. But on the 24th hour, I was in the middle of doing a reply to somebody, a very lengthy reply to somebody on Facebook, no less. I was telling John, I posted it to Facebook for the first time in like 2 or 3 years. And I decided, you know what, I need to pound this response out. This is taking too long. I reached for my other keyboard, which I still have plugged in, and then I'm tripping all over myself there. It's like I couldn't figure out where the damn keys were anymore. And it had only been 24 hours. It was I slowed down just as much. So I was equally shitty on both keyboards. So, but it's getting there. I tell you, just I find myself constantly resetting because I try to get ahead of myself, and I start doing what I do on a normal keyboard, which is I typically hover my hands and then start pecking and finding stuff. And this keyboard, you really need to be in that position and just trust your fingers and just move them up, down, just an inch and hit all your keys. And I constantly find myself resetting and putting my hands back on the keyboard where it belongs, and just trusting and just trying to get that confidence in typing. But I tell you, the biggest thing I love is on a normal keyboard, I was always accidentally, because my fat fingers, I was always accidentally hitting the enter key when I was either trying to do a quote or a single quote. I was always hitting the enter key, and that is completely not an issue on this new keyboard. Where that enter key is perfect. It's like one in on the thumb, and I never accidentally hit it, or I haven't accidentally hit it yet.
See, that's been another complaint of mine, is I'm used to that enter key being over on my pinky and just like hitting it, and nope, not there.
See, that's one of the things I'm starting to try to use that historically I haven't used for typing are my pinkies. I'm not a pinky typer, and now I'm trying to train my pinkies into saying, okay, this is, you have these keys.
You need to work now.
Yeah, it's like, stop slacking. You got to do some work.
You got some stuff to do here.
Yeah, but the
all right, enough about keyboards.
No, I'm not done. No, go ahead.
No, it's fine. I was gonna go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say no. Really, I am done. I don't have anything to say.
A story came across Twitter, not about PHP, going back to basic politics and crap that just floored me, that I just thought I would share because, again, I had no clue that this happened. back in 2017, actually. You know that if you're arrested, you shouldn't talk to the cops. The cops are not your friends.
Right.
I'll agree.
Yes.
I've had to explain that to my daughter. She didn't understand why.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, they're never talking to you to try to find out how you're innocent. They're just building evidence. They're not trying to find. Yeah, I get it. Mm-hmm.
The one time I was arrested, I made not necessarily a mistake. I talked way too much. Had I read this before, I wouldn't have.
I think you buried the lead here.
You like that? But if you ask for a lawyer, they have to stop any questioning until you have a lawyer. But it turns out there are ways around that for the cops that absolutely just mind boggle me, where you could use very normal vernacular for where you're at. Back in 2017, somebody said, "I want a lawyer, dog." And it's perfectly fine vernacular. You're trying to say, "Hey, I want a lawyer," but because it said lawyer, dog, and the way it got transcribed in transcription in the courtroom, they actually wrote lawyer, dog, GOG. It went up through the courts, up to the Supreme Court, who refused to hear it and upheld whatever the court below them is, as if the person really wanted a lawyer dog and
Dog
not a lawyer.
Yeah.
So no, a literal lawyer dog, not even a dog lawyer.
So my question when I read that, and I think I'm on board with what you're saying, John. There was no reason for a misunderstanding. It's not like that was that weird of a way to speak. But my bigger question was, what if the person isn't able to speak English? It's like, and they ask for a lawyer in another language. It's,
well, I think if you can't speak English, they're going to find a translator, because you're not going to be able to incriminate yourself anyway, right? In English at that point. I think the whole point of the message is be very clear. I'm not saying anything. I want to talk to a lawyer, or I want to invoke my Sixth Amendment rights, and I want access to counsel, or I want a lawyer, and that's it. Don't say any more or any less. Another similar case came up where somebody said, "I think it's time to speak to a lawyer," or no, I think they said maybe it's time to talk to a lawyer, almost like it was a question, or it wasn't a firm "it is time," and then they said some other things that were then held against them. So it's just being very clear, especially with what's going on in the world right now. Be very clear. I'm not speaking. I want to talk to a lawyer.
Hopefully, with what's going on in the world right now, this won't be an issue again, because police reform is the big deal right now, and what they're doing and getting away with is bizarre. I mean, horrifying.
But not when it's coming from the top. The things that are being said from the top are just absolutely mind-boggling.
We'll have to see.
Telling governors to rule with might,
dominance.
Like dominance. You need to dominate, or you're going to look like a fool. That's what's leading to this. That's the way people are acting. That's not how you treat your citizens. Not in the U.S.
So, Thomas, you got into it in our Slack channel this week, and I wanted to get into it with you on show about it. Yeah. Somebody had posted about an RFC that's being proposed. See how I transitioned that?
That was not a very good elegance. That was not an elegant segue at all.
Somebody had posted about a RFC in PHP for null safe operators, and you seem I saw it. I'm like, wow, that is going to clean up code. That looks really nice. I like that.
Nope.
You seemed very much against it.
Yeah, it's going to hide errors.
No, I don't think it's going to hide errors. Why? How do you think it's going to hide errors?
So this RFC allows you to add a question mark before the pointer on an object.
Mm-hmm.
And if that question mark is there and the object being
null.
referenced doesn't exist, then it just returns null instead of giving you a undefined property or method on null error. And boy, I couldn't tell you who this is for, except for lazy people who are coding poorly.
I don't. I don't.
It's going to be
that.
great in legacy apps.
What'd you say, John?
It's if
I said it's going to be great in legacy apps as we get more and more better. Wow, that was horrible. As we get better and better with type hints, especially with return type hints, it will become less of an issue. But there are still so many applications, so many methods that return an object or false or null, or as an early escape plan, they just return out of the method. So it's basically a void or a null.
Right, but they shouldn't do that. That's my
Should.
issue number one is that
Shouldn't.
yeah, objects should you should be throwing an exception when you're expecting an object and get null instead. And number two is just the examples where they chain this 3 layers down: session, user, get address, country. If there's a failure here, you don't know where the failure occurred. Was it the user that didn't exist, or the get address method that didn't exist, or the country that wasn't set? Or maybe country was null, but the user account wasn't defined. Like maybe null is a valid country, but now you've pushed your error of a missing user on the session further down the stack where it can do even more damage.
But there are times where you don't care where the error happens. Somebody that brought this.
That's a smell.
It is. So the person that brought this to my attention, their comment was, in a perfect world with well-designed and strongly typed PHP, maybe it isn't as helpful, and it does seem to encourage breaking the law of the meter, but there are lots of places like fetching a single entity from Doctrine where it'd be really nice. So you're calling Doctrine with where it will return a collection or null, and if you're not catching it, PHP throws an error. So that you'll get back a null item versus a collection.
Yeah, so you check your record first.
But now you're adding additional code at that point that you may not need to.
I could implement this exact same functionality by just putting an ampersand or an @ sign in front of the call. So when it returns null, silence the error.
Silence the error.
You're doing the exact same thing.
You can't silence a fatal error though, right? Is calling on null a fatal, or is it an exception? That just suppresses error messages. It doesn't stop from actually throwing an error. I think that's the difference.
It's just a notice.
It's just a notice.
Yeah, trying to get property of non-object.
And if you add that, you get back a null in that object or that variable?
Yeah, because there's no return.
No, it can't be just a notice. It's got to be a fatal error.
It's got to be an error.
I run into that often where execution is halted at that point.
Well, I just did it in Tinker, so Tinker might be suppressing it somehow.
Where I see this being useful is especially where you are calling a long chain of methods, where when you expect to get back something, maybe you'll check that for null or not, but you don't care where along that chain it broke. And you don't want to have to say, after every single argument. Hey, did I get back that object that I was expecting or not?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's just going to add to a bunch of, if this is null, then do something. If this is null, then do something, versus checking it once afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are pros and cons to it.
Yeah, I'll admit I didn't see the cons until you guys started talking. I liked it. Like when I saw it, I'm like, oh yeah, that because I still do this too. But I'm like, yeah, I like that. That looks very clean. But I do kind of see what you're saying. Even Thomas's point of hiding where the failure is at, it seems legitimate to me. But
And I am correct here. Item equals new standard class, DD, item thing.
That's different though. You're calling item thing on a class. That's different than saying $item arrow something without item with where item is null.
Okay, so that gives me
A
trying to
fatal
get
error.
property of non-object error exception.
Right.
If I throw an ampersand, if I throw an @ sign in front of it,
You should still get that.
I get null. I
If
do
that's the
not
case,
get
then
the
what-
exception.
If that's the case, then this RFC means absolutely nothing,
Correct.
which doesn't make any sense.
Which is what I've been trying to say. This functionality already exists, and it's using, it's exactly duplicated.
So why
Maybe
isn't that
there's-
coming up in the
maybe there's a-
RFC?
Maybe there's a better use case, whatever, but because this is a special kind of error suppression. This is a new kind of error suppression, but all it is an error suppression. And error suppression is a code smell.
I agree.
Yes, it makes the code tighter and leaner, but it does so because it's suppressing potentially a dozen errors, or it's appearing to throw an error when there shouldn't have been one because null and null are different. Null due to an exception and null due to an expected result are two different things. So now, like I said, with the country, if you're expecting that the country maybe can be null on a user account, but it turns out the user account just doesn't even exist, now you're getting what you expected to be null for a null country, but not realizing that you've just skipped over 3 errors.
in chat, what's the name here? Eric, Eric asks, is this similar to Laravel optional? I don't think it is, because optional. First thing, I'm not sure if you can chain optional, but optional is just that. It says, hey, this, if we have it, use it. If not, it's not a problem. This is
That's the same. That sounds like the same thing though. That actually came up in our Slack channel of somebody saying
Oh, did it?
optional, optional, optional.
Yeah.
When we were talking about this exact thing.
I really should pay more
So it sounds like
attention
it's
to
very. It sounds like it is the same thing.
It's the same thing as optional. I mean, there are plenty of existing ways to handle this. You could make a programmatic version that just said or null, and it checked every. This is dumb.
Are you saying optional can be chained as well? Oh, I see what they did. Optional, and then optional inside. Oh, that is horrible looking.
Sure, it's horrible looking, but what is the intention here? Because it doesn't clean up code; it just obfuscates code. It doesn't prevent errors; it just obfuscates them. I mean, this is
It will. So I run into this often enough where I get something called on a null object. I do have to go fix the code.
absolutely because it means that there's an error.
Yeah.
I get it all the time. All the time I get a null object error, and that means that there is a bug, and I have to fix the bug.
And I'll edit
What-
out. You have a good point later.
or check within the chain prior to calling what possibly could have gone wrong.
Right, because if you're getting null and you don't expect it, then you're not handling the null case.
Yeah, this would come up a lot using third-party libraries, where if they're not doing strict typing, they don't have good return values. I could see wanting to use this in that case where
Okay, but then take the case where you have a crappy third party that is using this functionality and stops throwing errors for stuff you needed to throw errors for. This
Valid point.
is a tool for bad programmers explicitly. It means you're not validating your data, or you have a bug and you're not addressing it.
All right, I think
there's
like it so much.
changed my mind.
Damn it, John!
there is no valid use case for this at all.
See, he changed my mind because I used to think the same thing about the @ operator. Again, going back 20 some years ago, you threw the @ operator everywhere because you didn't care about those errors.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I saw that, I would scream at somebody. I mean, what are you doing? This doesn't belong here. So, okay, you've changed my mind.
Well, damn it! I don't want to record anymore. Let's wrap this shit up.
I've heard people saying, well, what about these expansive applications that receive JSON data that's not necessarily formatted the same way, or its formatting changes or whatever? Well, then you're not validating it. You're not validating your incoming data. So that's your problem. You have to fix that. Or, if you've got something that there might not be a user there, then you need to check for that and handle it.
Mm-hmm.
But I have not seen a good, valid example of where a good programmer would want to use this.
Butter Crumpets disagrees. Says that if you're a good programmer, you can fix bad programmers' code because you can now find it more easily.
I mean, it's just search for the @ operator, or search for bad, I don't know, search for to-dos.
Look for
to me, this is a to-do.
All right. I liked it, but I guess I'm
all the examples I keep seeing are well, inexperienced programmers will use this a lot. Like, good, so they'll get into a bad habit. We're going to promote a bad habit.
And this hasn't been accepted. This was just an RFC, so it's not even necessarily something that's coming. It's just something somebody had suggested. So it was just interesting because it came up in our Slack, and I whenever you have a strong opinion about something, I like to bring it up on the show. So
well, and in the RFC itself, the example it says is currently checking for null leads to deeper nesting and repetition, which is like, there's a wrong assumption number one is that you would have to nest in order to check the full depth of your object. It's just validation with a shrug. Well, I don't really care that much.
So Thomas, you would have enjoyed. John and I just got off another recording. We recorded our interview for PHP Architect this month. No, yes, this month, yeah. And it was with Eric Mann. He's the person who writes the Security Corner article for PHP Architect. Yeah, that was. I mean, I don't know, John, how you felt about it, but man, that was a great interview.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
He's always been a good speaker, and I think that's why he's done so well at conferences. He's been able to write so many articles for the magazine over the past few years.
And I said that to bring up the point that he mentioned that if you don't do anything else with your web browser, install an ad blocker extension and install an extension called Privacy Badger from EFF Technologies. Are you familiar with Privacy Badger, Thomas?
I'm not.
Oh, okay.
That was like his number one recommendation, especially for people working from home.
Yeah. I would have given you a heads up had we had more time between recordings, because I would have liked your input on it. But I have the tab pulled up. It says a Privacy Badger automatically learns to block invisible trackers instead of keeping list of what to block. So somehow, I guess it has some sort of AI behind it. I don't like to use the word AI, and they don't use the word AI, but it's a learning sort of
But it also
blocking thing.
it doesn't send any of your information back to Privacy Badger for it to learn anymore.
So
And with
what it
Thomas, you're
says
right. It was
here,
just a notice.
what it says here is that it sends the do not track signal with all your requests, and if it sees a website ignoring the do not track signal, it will add it to a block list.
Yeah. So I have it queued up to install. He mentioned that, and then we asked a lot about security on like communication. My big gripe was email, and how bad email was, and how I completely failed with getting my family around the idea of PGP, which the world couldn't get their head around PGP. So,
I mean,
but
I tried at doctors' offices back in the '90s, and I couldn't get them to do it. So, if you
right.
can't get people to deal with really personal information, you're not going to get your average user saying, "Hey, can you pick up a gallon of milk on your way home?" to do it.
But he did mention that he's a big supporter of Signal for instant messaging. So I think I have that. I don't use it, but I have it. But I think I'm gonna have to see about maybe turning the girls, my daughters and my wife onto it, just to have a little bit more security in our communication. So I just gave away all the interesting talking points we had on the other podcast. So nobody needs you can just listen to this podcast. No, I'm just kidding. Listen to the other podcast and subscribe to the magazine, please. So,
Especially because he says it way more eloquently than we just did.
oh yeah, I mean he actually seems like he knows what he's talking about instead of us like regurgitating things we overheard.
That is helpful.
Yeah. So. All right. I don't know. Have we? I mean, it feels like it's been an hour. Has it been an hour?
It's just been under an hour.
I'm showing over, but hey, whatever.
I have an interesting thing, and this is not necessarily PHP related, but EA has released Command and Conquer remastered code onto GitHub.
What's that? What's that mean?
Command and Conquer was an old video game that they just recently remastered as a new release, and the full source code is now on GitHub as released by Electronic Arts.
Is it open source? I mean, can you like compile it yourself or what?
Yeah.
Huh. Cool.
I could have sworn I had something similar to this on the Trello board, and I don't see it there. So good segue, Thomas. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's under the GNU, the GPL.
Oh,
Well,
Thomas.
okay.
Thomas has it on Trello.
No, I have something similar, not that.
Oh.
Microsoft open sourced GW Basic.
What is?
We haven't talked about that. Basic. Did you ever program in Basic back in the 80s, 90s?
Are you kidding me? I rocked Basic, man. I'm waiting for it to make its comeback.
They made it open source. Like you can install it
with go-tos and data commands and all that.
Oh my! This was how I learned to program when I was 10 years old. And I still have my reference manual where when I was first learning to program, I would just flip through the reference manual and find a new command and be like, "Oh, let me try this," and then I would test it out.
Well, I would go get Cocoa Computing magazine, and it would have pages of basic programming that I would then put into my, I would copy into my system, and it was awesome.
I know. So I saw that and was like just floored. They're not accepting pull requests. It's on GitHub, but it really was just a, hey, here it is for historical purposes. You know, do with it what you will.
Well, I don't think they'd have to worry about pull requests anyways, because it's not written in C.
I was to say, so what is ASM? I don't even know what that is.
Assembly?
Yes.
Oh, is that assembly? Oh.
This is assembly language.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
So if you were to pop open, now first off, I'm not sure how they did this, but it does say that the initial commit was 38 years ago.
You can change your commit history easily.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, you've never seen people do that to change their little commit message at the bottom to say like "hire me."
No.
Yes, I
Yeah.
have. I thought
Yeah.
that was done differently.
Oh,
No,
this is awesome.
You change your commit history.
So yeah, it's raw assembly, and boy, I couldn't tell you a single thing that this does.
Well,
it's
well commented. It tells you what each line does. It's perfect. But yeah, this is insane. Man, this is how people used to code, huh? Woo.
It's how machines used to code. Heroes.
Yeah, it was just a bright spot when like just made me think back to my childhood and made me happy.
I'm telling you, man, Microsoft's gonna go Linux. I feel it.
We talked about it on the podcast today. Pay attention to the interview coming up in the next month.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we had predicted Microsoft was going to buy Ubuntu, but that hasn't happened yet. Okay, I think that's good. I mean, yeah, I'm I don't know, suspiciously tired. I'm way too sober to be talking to you guys. It's too much light outside.
Yeah,
you're supposed to start early when you're podcasting. Isn't that the rule?
I feel dirty. Oh.
Is that you did? Oh, see, this is the first episode in history where John's drinking and neither me or Eric is.
I tell you, man.
We're setting new records.
I feel shameful for some reason. I don't know, but all right. Okay.
All right.
I think
that's before you wrap up. No,
Hmm?
before you wrap up, just so I can clear this off the board because it's stupid. Twitter is allowing all employees to work from home forever. I bring that up just because I went to the dentist office for the first time this morning since all this crap has happened, and talking to them, they're like, "You get to work from home?" I'm like, well, I have been for many years. It's not new. So Twitter made the announcement that from here on out, employees will be able to work at home forever if they want to.
And,
Thought that was interesting.
Weren't you? I mean, maybe it was just me. I was surprised to find out that wasn't the case for them.
I'm not shocked because a lot of the big companies, Facebook was very adamant they would not allow work from home. They just made the switch recently as well, where they're going to allow a portion of their workforce to work from home. From my understanding, most people don't want to at Facebook, and I don't know if it's because they're used to going into the office now.
Free food?
But,
I don't know.
But Facebook was very adamant that they wouldn't hire remote. You had to move to their office locations in order to work for them. So maybe things will change.
Yeah, it's good. See
Well,
how that works out for them.
The 90s revolved around this idea of everyone's going to be working from home and telecommuting is going to be the future. And so many tech companies jumped on that, like Cisco, and it turned out that none of the businesses wanted to allow that because it just disrupted things too much. So now, when it was mandated upon every business, we've got these tools to do it. And the businesses are saying, well, now that we're here and we can close down 3 of the 5 floors that we rent at a high rise, that's going to save us a huge amount of money. So I'm totally fine with teleconferencing.
Yeah, could you imagine 25, 30 years ago where you didn't have the tools you have now for communicating with people? It would have been completely different.
Yeah, it would have been fundamentally, I mean, I would say 15 years ago, it wouldn't have been possible.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about half the people having dial-up connections and and flip phones.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
now
well, and I think
I don't even need a home office. I could work off of my phone from anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
well, I think that's only part of it. I think it's a big part. I mean, having the technology around to allow it. But I also think that companies didn't want to invest in a workflow, figuring out what the workflow on making sure people are working and how to, you know, how to track how productive somebody's being if they're not there at the office. And
I mean, we have that issue still. I mean, that's never
Yeah.
going to go away. You're still constantly wondering, am I paying somebody to sit around and do nothing right now? Are they watching TV or playing games?
well,
You're never gonna
exactly.
get away
And
with it.
that's why some companies still don't want to do it, right? Because they say if nothing else, they're at the office, right? We know they're physically here. But I think that this pandemic forced that issue a little bit, and they realized that we can put some metrics in place to track their performance, to track that they're being productive. They might even be becoming comfortable with the idea of, yeah, I don't care if they're watching TV in the middle of the day, as long as they're producing, I'm fine with it.
And I think, not to get too crazy socialist on you, but it's empowering the workers as well to say, I'm not going to an office. So, you know, when you're looking for a new job or something like that, you're going to get a lot more people saying, I work better from home. My systems work better from home. I have a smoother workflow. I get stuff done that I need to get done, and I get work done.
I don't spend 2 hours on the road for no reason.
Right, because if your commute, like my commute from Encinitas to downtown when I was working there, could be an hour and a half each way. Easy.
Mm.
So why am I throwing away 3 hours of my day every single day to sit in an office where I could do the same thing at home?
Mm-hmm.
That's a waste of my time. It's a waste of the company's time. I could be doing so much more.
Well,
I could be working out or working on hobby. I'm not doing those things, but I could be.
I think they also realize that, you know, people with family, you know, kids get sick, you get sick, but if you work from home, your tolerance is a lot higher. Like, I have to be really sick for me not to work from home, or my children aren't young now, but even when my children, you know, were young, if they were sick and I worked from home, I could still be productive. Yeah, maybe I'm not working a full 8 hours, but I'm definitely, I could probably give you 6 or 7 hours. I just need a little bit more time with the sick kid while I take him to the doctor.
And you're not going to get sick as often. The flu is not going to sweep through your house and disable half of your workers.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's always been pros and cons to it, and I think what the pandemic did was force the hand of looking at some of the pros and trying to figure out, you know, stop using the cons as a crutch for not trying to implement workflows that can help people work from home. And it kind of forced these companies' hand to do that. And like you said, I think some of them are seeing the benefit. Like, hey, you know, we don't need so much office equipment. We don't need so much office space. We can shrink these things, save money, and yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Well, we had a friend number of years back whose business mentality was, no, work from home doesn't work for developers. There are some people that can do it, but as a corporation, I don't think it works out that well. And he is now a huge advocate of work from home tech.
Oh, is this somebody I know?
Yeah, from the building where we would meet up in Carlsbad.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Oh, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, adamantly against work from home, and is now a proponent of work from home tech. And I think is even working with startups that specialize in work from home tech. So
that's awesome.
He's actually working with our most recent host for SDPHP. If we're talking about the same person,
I'm sure we are.
I believe we are. Yeah. I wasn't gonna get that specific with it, but yeah.
Yeah. So you know, mentalities are changing even at the higher levels, even at the advisors levels. So I'm excited for it. And, you know, I've looked at LinkedIn and jobs like job sites like Lara Jobs, and it's 90% remote right now because no one wants to open up and create a nuclear meltdown pandemic.
Well, that's weird. Why not?
I don't know. It's some liability thing, I imagine.
Weird.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, are we done now? Can I wrap up?
Yes, bring us the Patreons.
Patreons! Shit, I forgot about the Patreons. I should have had that up the whole time
That's why I said it.
Patreons,
That's
thank
why
you
I
to
posted.
our Patreons. There we go. Thanks to all our Patreons for supporting our show. We don't talk about you guys enough, and we appreciate it. Buttery, since you're listening, you are still officially the longest running Patreon supporter, and I think John and I have talked about it. We're going to get you something. I'll reach out to you for an address or something. We'll send some international swag your way. So I said it now. It has to happen. I appreciate you.
Oh,
All
yeah, I
right.
was supposed to harass you about sending out the keychains this week. I forgot to.
Yeah, I know. I need to. And I have the box in my garage. I need to kind of. Actually, I don't. I realize I don't have it in my garage. I thought it was the box I brought home and put in my garage, but I did take a couple boxes from the office and put it in my storage unit. And I realized when I went into my box in my garage that I didn't have the swag in that box. It's in the goddamn storage units, and I got to go there and get the swag from that. But yes, you're right. I need to get that out. I'm slacking. Okay, that's it. I'm done talking to you bozos. It's way too early, and I got things to do. So that's gonna do it for episode 193 of PHP Ugly.
Thank you for joining us early. I appreciate being able to be on the show.
Thanks for hanging out with the people who watch the live stream. The people who listen to audio, it's probably like the same drive to work that you're listening to us, so it doesn't really impact you. But yes, I was going to say something. Oh, 7 episodes, guys. 7 episodes to 200. I'm just saying. If we record an episode a day for the next week, we could get there. I don't know if you guys are up for that.
It would be Grayson's birthday at that point. Perfect.
Really? Perfect. You see? Everything lines up. All right, maybe that won't happen.
Yeah, nobody wants to
just
listen
saying,
to 7 hours a week.
We're getting close. I feel like I want to get there because I feel like the country's going to fall apart before it happens.
I think we should take a few months off.
I say we get to 199 and just give it a hiatus for about 6 months. And... All right, that's it. 193 is in the book. I'm Eric.
I'm John.
I'm Tom. Keep it
ugly.
ugly.
All right.
Right.
I would love to hang out after the show, but
Okay.
for a date.
Before you go though, did you do the firmware?
Yeah. It's
How do you?
You go to their site, you download the the file. There's actually a flash drive built into the keyboard. So through a key combination, you mount the hard drive to your local system, drag the file onto the drive
Folder.
Yeah.
Oh, and then it just runs it by itself?
Well, you do another key combination. You change the name to update.upd, I think it is. And then there's another key combination you press, like program shift U, I think it is. And it actually, if the file's there, it updates the firmware.
I assume the instructions are on the site.
Oh, yeah. Super slick, super easy.
All right, is that the only little perk you get with it?
There's a few bug fixes, but most of them probably won't affect us because we're not advanced users at this point.
All right, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, we're like 4 or 5 revisions.
Okay.
Like, have you
cool.
printed out the status at all?
No, what's that?
Go into a terminal or go into somewhere like a blank file, text editor, Vim editor, whatever, and do a program shift escape. Print the status. It'll show you which firmware you're on and a bunch of other information about the keyboard.
Oh, I'll have to give that a
Did
shot.
Did you stop recording on Zencaster?
Yes, Zencaster is done.
Okay.
Stop and
Oh yeah,
logo
I
as
see
well.
that.
All right, man. Well, I know you
Alright.
gotta
Hey,
go. But
Secular Sexuality is now live. Just saying, if you want to listen to a live podcast after this,
I don't know what that
go
is.
check it out.
What is that?
It's a podcast produced by the ACA, which is the atheist community of Austin, out of Texas.
Okay. I'm not sure if I have an interest in that podcast, but appreciate the offer. All right. Yes.
Oh, so you check it out.
Okay.
right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.